Alright guys, so I finally finished Saints Row 2022. And so today we're going to go through, talk about all the things I didn't like, did like. The game's been out for about a week-ish now, and so I've played my fair share of completely finished the main story and done a lot of side activities, seen what other people think, and so I'm ready to give you guys my opinion on it. So instead of going through and doing our typical graphics, gameplay, story, bugs, performance, all of that stuff, and then a final rating, with this game, I think it's a lot easier to just do the good versus the bad. So let's go ahead and start with the good. So, right off the bat, customization is great. Both vehicle customization and character customization. They give you a lot of options, a lot of different looks, there's a lot of variety here, and there's presets which I actually liked a lot for each vehicle, right? Now, they're not the coolest things in the world. It's not like they give you the best, most expensive options, then like a mid-range, then a cheap preset. It's just kind of a randomized preset, but for the most part, they looked pretty decent. I actually used some of them for some of the cars. But you have all types of customization here, right? Like grills, exhaust, hoods, interiors, exteriors, roof, spoilers, side kits, wheels, I mean all types of stuff with like 4 or 5 options in each one, along with performance upgrades like nitrous and grappling hooks, better tires, and then just an overall speed boost upgrade. Now with the character customization, I like to think of character customizers as kind of 3 tiers. There is the pick your character, do you want to be male or female? That's probably the most basic level. Then there's the set character within a game, like something like Watch Dogs, the first 1 or 2, for example, where you change the clothing on the character, but the character itself is set. And then you have something like this, where you can completely change like the eyebrow depth and the chin width and length, stuff like that, like a Skyrim or a Saints Row, obviously, or for example, a GTA Online, stuff like that. And how does it hold up with those character customizations? It does what it does fairly well, right? I feel like for the most part, like the face and body modifications and all of these customizers are relatively the same, but for the most part, it does what it needs to do. Now, as far as clothing customization, if you've watched my first impressions video, so I'm going to repeat myself a bit, but a lot of the stuff they do in clothing customization, again, early on you don't have a lot of options, but as you go down the line later, you get clothing from both buying it from the stores and actually going through and progressing in the story. They give you different sets of clothes. Now, a problem I have with this is that instead of something like, a game where you have one store where you get your clothing from, or a game where the, clothing is purely locked to progression within the story, or something like GTA where you have kind of a couple chains of retail clothing stores, like 2 or 3 to choose from, Saints Row has the problem of doing too much. There's a lot of brands of clothing. I want to say there's probably 15 plus, right? I could be wrong, but that's what it felt like. And every single different brand has a different set of items. So brand A could have 2 pairs of shoes, a hat, and a shirt. Brand B could have a jacket, a different pair of shoes, a different hat, and a pair of underwear, right? Brand C, blah, blah, blah. You get my point. They all have different things. So that's great for the variety and the amount of customization for your character. The problem with that is essentially to see all of your options and the different styles, you have to go to every single shop. And so that gets old really quick. This is not a new problem. The old Saints Rows also had this problem. It's nothing that they did wrong here, but it's a change I would have liked to have seen made, right? I would just prefer to have one spot, or 2 or 3, maybe like a low tier, a mid tier, and a high tier. And while they do have price tierings with different styles of clothes, but just you have to learn from going and knowing the name brand, for the most part, it's pretty much random what you're going to get other than a few specific shops. So continuing with the positive, character customization and car customization aside, there's a decent array of weapons. I wouldn't say that there's a lot. I wouldn't say that there's not enough. It pretty much has 2 or 3 in every subcategory: pistols, SMGs, assault rifles, shotguns, sniper rifles, explosives. I mean, you got a couple. There's skins you can put on them and upgrades for each one. But for the most part, I didn't really mess around with that. I just upgraded the weapon, chose the one I liked, and stuck to that. So that's one that kind of sits in the middle for me. Another positive I have is pretty much just the general gameplay overall. It works well, it does what it needs to do for an open world type game, and it performs well when it needs to. Now, it's nothing groundbreaking. If you've played a Saints Row, if you've played a Watch Dogs, if you've played a GTA, you've pretty much played this before. But again, it does what it needs to do when it needs to do it. And one final positive I have is the story, and it's not that it's an incredibly creative or good story, it's fine, right? But I can't really tell you the stories from the other Saints Row games. Now, that largely has to do with the fact that I was probably like 16 when I played them, and that was a long time ago. I can't really tell you what was happening in those. But I felt that there was more of a story presence here. There was an attempt to have characters that were not boss male, boss female, gang member male, gang member female. Now, there's definitely some of those, right? But there are actually characters here that have characteristics, and I don't dare say arcs, but changes in their character the slightest, tiniest bit, right? So overall, the attempt at a story is there. It's not all jokes and it's just stupidness the entire time. And that's pretty much all I have for positives. Now, there's a couple of things, minute things here and there. Like, the prank system works well. It allows you, to mess with your friends if you're playing in a co-op session. You do some challenges like headshot kills or running people over, and you can turn your friend into like a toilet, right? Talk about it more in my first impressions video. Let's talk about my problems with the game, because there's a lot more than positives. So, if it wasn't obvious from this clip, and just from editing this video, I'm trying to find gameplay that doesn't showcase bugs is a problem. You have every bug imaginable, right? For example, that prank system I was just talking about, where you can turn your friend into some kind of weird object or funny object after doing a challenge. Well, I was stuck as a bin for multiple sessions for multiple days, both in gameplay and in cutscene.
I drove that car all the way here from Guadalajara.
Can we skip this?
My family's so far away, It felt like I was keeping part of them with me. She never let anyone else drive.
Let's see, there's T-posing, people getting stuck in walls, the game not letting us join. That happened a lot. Objectives just not working at all, people not driving to locations and just reversing and driving back and forth over and over again. I mean, there's so many bugs. We didn't go more than an hour without running into a bug. And I'm still stuck on it.
Oh no. You get mine? Can you jump to it or anything?
What?
Can you like jump to mine or anything?
No, I can't do anything.
Shoot.
That's how it's been the whole time, the whole ride here. Now I'm invisible.
Friendly fire's on, I should be able to kill you.
And just to continue down the list of negatives, the side missions are terrible. There's side missions split into different categories. I mean, everything feels like it was made 10 years ago. And then the game was put on the shelf, and then they decided to make it again. They updated the graphics the tiniest bit, and then released the game. Right? You have wanted missions, which are drive here and kill this person for an insignificant amount of money. Those are side missions. Then you essentially have businesses that you take over, and it can be stealing cars, or dropping off radioactive materials, or stealing rival food company vans, or like doing LARPing stuff. And there's a bunch of activities and different businesses that you get that bring you passive income. You do side activities for these businesses that increase the amount of passive income that they bring you, which is a good idea, works on paper. Other Saints Row games have done it. The problem is that some of these places have 1 to 2 missions that you have to do to fully unlock their maximum amount of passive income, and some have 14, right? So stealing a food truck is fun the first time, but the 14th time, not so much, especially when it's just a glorified car chase. and you get in car chases so much and so many other side missions and main missions. The other problem with this is these ventures, these side missions. They call them ventures because that's how you make your passive income in the game. These ventures, they're tied to story progression. So to do mission 14, let's say, I don't know what number it is, you need to get this much progression in your ventures. To do mission 15, you need to have this many ventures done. And so we got to a point where we literally had to do side missions to progress our ventures in order to progress in the main story. If that's what you want to do, that's fine, but you gotta make the side missions interesting. That doesn't work if I just have to go beat up LARPing people with fake guns for the 14th time. It was funny the first 2 times, after that it was boring. So we've covered the bugs, and the side missions, and I mean, kind of the graphics. The graphics sometimes look really bad, and other times they look fine, right? So these are just some of the negatives. My other negatives are just the story itself. So I know I kind of put it on the positive list. Well, there's an attempt at a story, which is nice. It's not good, right? It's very boring. Nothing really happens. It feels like everything that happened within this could have been like the intro to the game, except for like the final mission. But that is what it is. I don't want to get too much into spoilers here or there. So Saints Row is very much a make your own fun type of game. It always has been. This game does nothing new with that, but that's the problem. A lot of the systems that are broken from the original Saints Row, and a lot of the systems that work from the original Saints Row, are just copy and pasted, and the entire point of a sequel is to improve upon the last one, right? Whether it's a movie or a game or a damn book, all right? And so if we run down my list of, let's say, positives, if you want to call, the goofy relative overall gameplay and customization positives, yes, but Saints Row 2, Saints Row 3, Saints Row 4 all had that. I haven't played Saints Row the original, so I can't speak for that. If you want to talk about the negatives, the clothing shop problems, the bugs is something relatively new, because that's just how modern gaming is. They just release stuff when it's not finished. But the crappy story and the writing and the repetitive mission types, that's all problem old Saints Row games have. It's like they didn't try to progress anything. They took everything that worked in Saints Row 3 and the writing from Saints Row 4 and just made a new game. And that's pretty much all they do. And so, how are you going to like this game? If you haven't played it already, if you've been seeing a lot of reviews, a lot of people have been saying it's the best thing they've ever played, and a lot of people have been saying it's the worst thing they've ever played. And so where do I sit on this? Well, it highly depends on your tolerance to stupidity and bugs, a lot of bugs, and your exposure to what I would call 2010 open world Ubisoft games, right? And so essentially what I mean by that is anything like GTA Online, again, obviously any of the Saints Row games, Dying Light's formula, not so much the game type that it is, but how it does its open world system and its mission types, as well as Watch Dogs especially. I made the comparison while playing this. This is essentially just stupid Watch Dogs, right? Take all of the hacking and the cool mechanics out of Watch Dogs, and that's what this is. So your exposure to those things is going to greatly depend on how you like this game. If you haven't played a lot of stuff like that, then you're going to enjoy this because you've never played it before, and a lot of the stuff that's repetitive and boring and not new and old and stale, you've never seen before, so therefore that doesn't, it doesn't correlate. But, I mean, the bugs are still going to be there, obviously. But my main problem is there's nothing new. I've played this before, it feels like. And that's a problem when there's almost a decade between your two games. And so that's pretty much how I feel. Now, my expectations going into this were not high. I expected this to be bad, right? And if it would have came out and did everything that it already did, and it would have not been a buggy mess, this game would have got like a 5 or a 6 from me. Because honestly, the prank system is really funny and really good mechanic. So that probably would have elevated it to a 6. It would have been exactly what I was expecting, which would have been average, and that would have pushed it to above average, right? The problem with Saints Row 2022 is it's exactly what you're expecting. Stupid, goofy, make your own fun type of game, that's repetitive and just copy and pastes all of the problems with the open world genre, and then is broken, right? Like I said, I mean, I showed you the bugs. I have more broken, buggy clips than I do working ones, and that's a problem. So, my final verdict for Saints Row 2022, I've been going back and forth, right? But I think it's at a 4 out of 10. It's below average. It's not bad, because what it does fine, and for the most part, it doesn't do anything wrong. It doesn't offend me. It's just broken, and it's repetitive. And again, that's going to depend on your mileage with these types of games. But that's just my opinion. Guys, let me know what you think of Saints Row down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one.